I'm Steve Massengale. I represent District 4. I'm here tonight with my colleague, Dr. Jennifer Wilson. She'll make comments here shortly. We're grateful you're here to learn about moving into a deregulated market. We all have questions. Dr. Wilson and I don't have all the questions. We have our own questions, but we hope we're able to answer as many of them as we can. There's some members of the city staff. The city manager here is Jared Atkinson. Jared's here somewhere. There are some cards here. So tonight's topic is Lubbock Power and Light. If you have any other city issues for Dr. Wilson and I, you can write them on these cards. Council staff will pass them out if you need them, or you can grab them as you walk out. We will respond, okay? Because you may have other issues other than tonight. I'm going to let Dr. Wilson make some comments, and then we're going to kick it off and give it to Matt Rose.
Good evening, everybody. How are y'all doing this evening? Good. I'm Dr. Jennifer Wilson. I'm the councilwoman for District 5. Steve and I want to say thank you guys for coming. We know everybody in the city has lots of questions about this time in Lubbock. This is historical. We're transitioning, from LP&L to the retail electric market, and we want to make sure before that happens that everybody in our community has all their questions answered and that you feel secure in your choice moving forward. So I'm not going to take up much of your time. We're going to get to the meat of this, and we are going to welcome Matt Rose. I was like, where's Matt? He's behind us. Hey, Matt, come on up.
Yeah, I think so. Okay. All right. Well, first, can y'all hear me? Okay, there we go. So first things first, let's see if I can manage to do the technology real quick. Okay, good. So thank y'all for coming out here. I appreciate it. This is the last of a series of council member district meetings that we've had throughout the city. They started with council member Sheila Patterson Harris in District 1. And then over the last really 4 or 5 weeks, we've worked through kind of every part of the city so that we could be out here to present on where we are on this important project, but also more importantly, be able to talk with you one-on-one, answer questions. I'm going to run through a slide deck for you, which I know is always very exciting. But I think it is important because there are some aspects of this that are kind of visual, and I want to kind of walk you through, including using the state-sanctioned website where you'll be able to choose a new provider. So we're going to walk through that. But I'm going to try to get through that relatively quickly because I've found that the Q&A section of these presentations, to me, it's really become the most important part of this. Not just because you get answers to your questions, but nearly every single one of these meetings that I go to, there is a question from the audience that I didn't quite anticipate that we take back and we help populate the frequently asked questions on our website. It also populates just the forward-facing information that we're going to be putting out on a regular basis. Before we go through the slide deck, I do want up front to talk a little bit about timelines when it comes to this project. We've been talking about this project in some form since 2015, but we've really been talking about the competition part of this project in full for the past couple of years. And as we've gotten into like the last 6 months, we've been out there a lot saying that our tentative timeline was going to be that that we were going to move the remaining customers from ERCOT to the Southwest Power Pool at the end of this month, and that it would allow us then to have a shopping window where our customers could go pick their new provider in the August time frame, followed by us converting our customers to their new chosen providers in October. We have one final regulatory approval that we have to achieve, and that's with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC. They are the federal regulatory agency like the PUC is here in Texas. They need to bless this project, and we've not gotten that approval yet. We expected to get it on April 23rd, and we didn't. So we're working through the process, but just as soon as we get that approval, we're going to be out in front of the public. We're going to be putting information out there. We're going to make sure everybody knows then what the timeline is, because basically once we get that final approval, we then, in short order, can move our remaining customers over to the ERCOT grid, and once 100% of our customers are on the ERCOT grid, that really starts the official countdown of this project. because we can't go to competition until we have 100% of our folks across the line. And it's just simply because, we have two sets of wires in this city. One of them, the legacy LP&L lines, have been moved over to ERCOT. The lines that the city bought in 2010 from Xcel Energy are the ones that are yet to be moved. And as some of you all, I'm sure, are familiar, those lines are really alley by alley throughout the city. And so that's why, given the last week of rain and lightning, if sometimes there's an outage and your power's on and your neighbor's not, or vice versa, that's because there's those two sets of lines. So we've moved 70% of the lines over to ERCOT. We did that Memorial Day of 2021. We will move the remaining 30% of these lines over, connect them with our other ones. Everybody will be in ERCOT, and that will start this project in full. So with that kind of up front, I want to just quickly walk through kind of some of these slides. Starting off just very basically, what is competition? We've talked about this a lot, but competition is similar to shopping for cell phone plans, internet plans. It allows customers to go out and pick where they want their power to come from, who they want it to come from, how it's priced, what it looks like, and then therefore that will be your new power provider. When we make this transition in terms of Lubbock Power and Light, what we will continue doing is that Lubbock Power and Light will continue to be the delivery system for our customers. Today, we own and operate, maintain all of our wires, our poles, our substations, transmission lines. We will continue to own and operate those. We'll still play that role. It'll be our job to invest in those lines, to grow those lines, make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep up with the growing Lubbock. You will get to choose where your power comes from, and that power will run over our lines. And that's typically how this is done in the competitive market, is that you're allowed to choose who your provider is, but there's one entity that maintains the poles and wires. Basically, if you went out and every single provider that any one of y'all chose were to build their own lines to your house, it would result in just a chaotic mess of wires throughout the city, and that's just not the way this works. If you look at it today, for several decades, you had two companies building wires down each side of the alley to serve their customers, and you already see how much duplication of infrastructure we have in those alleys. And I'll just say up front that that's a project we're going to tackle once we make this move. The years that follow, we'll be going back and consolidating and cleaning up those alleys. What LP&L will not be as we make this transition, we will not be a choice of providers. We will not buy and sell electricity. We will simply maintain the infrastructure. We will not send bills directly to customers. When you pick your new provider, you will get one bill from your new provider. And that new bill, it will have what you have agreed to in terms of your rate with that new provider. And within that rate will be what it costs us to maintain our infrastructure. So company A, B, or C that you pick, you'll get a bill from that company. It'll include your LP&L charges on it. If you were in San Angelo or Midland, Odessa, Abilene, Wichita Falls, areas around us that have had this form of competition for 20 years, when you got your bill from whatever your chosen provider is, you would have on that bill a charge for the infrastructure. Encore AEP in this area around us will be doing a similar job to what they're doing. So if you were in San Angelo today, you would get your bill and it would have an Encore's wires charge on it, and that's where LP&L will exist going forward. Another thing to point out is that today, Lubbock Power and Light has the sole responsibility for the rates and the policies of Lubbock Power and Light. We don't set the rates and the policies for the water, wastewater, stormwater, or solid waste component of your City of Lubbock Utilities bill. You will still receive a City of Lubbock Utilities bill. You'll still call 775-2509 if you have a question about those services. You'll still go to cityoflubbockutilities.com to pay that bill. None of that will change. The only thing that will be changing when we make this migration is that Lubbock Power and Light will no longer be on the City of Lubbock Utilities bill. We'll be on your new provider's bill. So I want to show you this and take just a moment, because this chart here shows you today how our business operates. Right now, we're responsible for that entire pie chart. The light blue section of that pie chart, about 30% of your rate, that covers everything that LP&L does outside of buying power for our customers. So, all of our trucks, all of the maintenance of the lines, all of our long-term debt, salaries, everything else, everything that it takes us to deliver the power to your home is contained within that 30% of your rate. The dark blue is simply what it costs us to make or buy power that we pass through to our customers. When we make this transition, we'll no longer be in that business of buying power for our customers. Today, we go out, and for our 110,000 electric meters, we buy a certain amount of electricity that covers all of our needs. Whatever it costs us to buy that electricity, we spread it across the different rate classes, and that comes to you on your bill as your purchase cost recovery factor or your power pass-through. Simply what we buy the power for, we ship it through to our customers on our lines. We charge it there. In this new market, that orange section, that's what you're going to shop for. So the power provider that you go choose when the time comes is going to be the one that buys that or makes that power for you, and then it just flows to your home through our lines, and that's what's covered in that light blue. So I'm going to skip right through. So first and foremost, as we've started this process, as we've built out kind of this public presentation, we've gotten to know more about this project, and we get into more specifics. Everything that I'm out here talking about, everything that you hear from us is contained on our website. If you go to the homepage today, you'll see this website homepage. It's going to stay there until this project's over. And if you just go to the homepage, click read more, it's going to take you to the competition section. It's got all sorts of material in there. These handouts that we've created, the first edition of our shopping guide, it can be found here, one-pagers, videos, various different resources. Please check this out if you have more questions. The shopping guide that was handed out to you as you walked in is an important part of this process. It's going to tell you more about what competition is. It's going to tell you about where you can go to learn more. It's going to tell you what questions you need to ask when it comes time to talk to your new provider. This packet is not complete yet. One of the things that it's missing who these new providers are going to be when this project kicks off. We're not at a point in time where we can release those yet because those that are going to be serving customers here in Lubbock are still completing testing with us right now. We know 3 of the providers that are going to be here and operating in Lubbock because the City Council and the EUB made a very important decision a little while back in terms of naming who the default providers and provider of last resort are going to be. It's a really important designation. The 3 entities that were picked to serve in this role are Reliant Energy, TXU Energy, and Octopus Energy. The city put out, and LP&L put out a bid, and folks put in their submissions, and we had basically a special panel that included folks from the city, folks from LP&L, our former board chair, various different people that have been involved in this process to review all of these submissions and pick these 3 designations. When we get to the point in time where our customers go out and they choose their new provider, so we open up the shopping window. The shopping window lasts for 5 or 6 weeks, and customers go out and they shop and they pick the new provider. We will then close the shopping window down and spend a few weeks making sure that everybody is connected where they need to be connected in terms of their new providers. But importantly, we will also be able to see which customers have not chosen a provider. And if you are a customer who has not chosen a provider for any reason, you will be randomly assigned to one of these 3 providers that have been chosen. And through this process, they have agreed to take on these customers and take on these customers at a rate that is right there in the middle of the market. So that if you don't choose, you're going to land with a reputable provider at a rate that's going to be very similar to what folks have chosen in their chosen provider. This is just to make sure that nobody falls through the cracks. We don't want a situation, since we're making this big transition, where somebody didn't know where to go to get this done or how to get it done, fully understand the information, or quite frankly, just had no idea that this was even going on. As much as you try to promote these projects, there are going to be folks that just miss it completely. So whatever the reason is, if you don't choose, you'll be assigned to Reliant, to TXU, or to Octopus. You'll get those similar rates to everybody else, and you'll basically be on a month-by-month plan for 90 days. But at any point in time, if you want to go pick a new provider, you can, right? Because one has been chosen for you. At the end of that 90 days, I'm pretty sure there's going to be folks that just say, I'm fine with where I am, and then they'll be locked into a rate, and they'll continue on with that provider. But this was a way to get everybody across the line, and then if somebody wakes up and says, oh, shoot, I didn't go do anything about this, right then and there, they can go pick a provider and move on down the road with that provider. We talked a little bit, we've got some animated videos on the website that we talked about. We've got key events, we've got FAQs that we talked about. But I want to quickly get to this website. You can get to this website from lpnl.com, and I kind of encourage folks to do that. We have a lot of links that go to these resources where you can just go to lpnl.com and then go right through. But I always encourage people to do this and use this, because there are always going to be websites that mimic. There's going to be promoted ads that come up first if you just Google something. So best way to get there is through our website, but it's thepowertochoose.org. This is the state website where you can shop, that is controlled, monitored, regulated by the PUC. If you go to thepowertochoose.org today and you type in one of y'all's zip codes, nothing's going to populate because we're not in the market yet. And as I say, all of these providers that are going to be offering plans are still going through testing. We believe that really in the next week or two, testing will be complete. We'll be able to list every single registered provider on our website along with their contact information and their website, so folks can start taking a look at it. But if you were to go on thepowertochoose.org right now and use, let's say, Midland as an example, you can type in Midland's zip code, and it's going to populate plans, and they're going to look very similar to what we're going to see here in Lubbock. We're seeing in these cities around us that there's typically about 20 to 30 different providers that are offering about 120 to 150 different plans. Now, I'll show you in a minute how you can quickly kind of cut down on those choices, but just right off the bat, that's what's available if you just type in your zip code. Yes. Yeah. So each and every provider, and I'll show you here in a second what I mean by it. No, they'll have numerous different plans. So there may be 20 to 30 providers, but their offerings may number 120 plans, 130 plans that folks can choose from. Absolutely. And just know, too, that we'll do FAQ afterwards. You're always free to shout stuff out at me, but we'll do FAQ afterwards, and I'll stick around as long as need be to answer everybody's questions, just so you know. So, using Midland as the example, this is a screenshot that I took a couple of weeks ago. Prices have shifted a little bit since then, but this gives you a good idea. Right now with Lubbock Power and Light, our rate is 13.5 cents all in. Earlier when you saw that pie chart and you saw those two different pieces, right? If you take our total rate, our base rate, plus what it costs us for power that we pass through to customers, we're at 13.5 cents. If you look up here, and I know it's probably very hard to see in the back of the room, so I'll just kind of shout it out, but when you type in thepowertochoose.org and you type in the zip code, it's going to immediately populate the plans from the cheapest to the most expensive. And you can see for Midland, it's about 3 weeks ago, the cheapest plan was 7.7 cents per kilowatt hour versus our 13.5 cents. So, you're going to hear me say this a lot as we get closer, but this choice can be as simple or as complex as you want to make it. If you just want to sign the lowest cost plan, you can literally type in the zip code, go to that 7.7 cent plan, click through, sign the contract, and you're done. But I would encourage you to take a second and look down the list of offerings, because that 7.7 cent plan is coming from a company that's not as well known. And all of these companies have star ratings up to 5 stars that come from the complaints, reviews, whatever it might be that the PUC gets about each and every one of these from their customers. So this first plan is a 3-month plan for 7.7 cents per kilowatt hour from a 2-star company. Now, you may be somebody that says, you know what, in however long that I've been with LP&L, I've never called LP&L. I don't really have any need for customer service. I just want the cheapest plan and get my bill and be done with it. And that will probably get you there. But if you're somebody that does call in, then you may want to go down that list and say, I'm not going to go with the lowest cost plan, go with something a little bit higher that gives me more amenities, gives me a company with a little bit better customer service rating. On the left side of the screen are filters. And you don't have to fill these out, but it shows you, if you do, how you can start kind of winnowing in and getting a plan that's more tailored for you. Now, as I go down here, let's say that I go, all right, I only want companies that are 4- and 5-star rated companies. Like, I want to start there. So you click that. And let's say you go to the next one, and I'm not saying anybody here is going to be in this category, but let's say that you're somebody that says, I want 100% of my power to come from green energy, from renewable. I know that there's some folks out there because they come and harp on us a lot about why don't you have more green in your portfolio. One of the disadvantages of having, a municipally owned utility like ourselves is that we can't go person by person and create our resource portfolio to meet each and every person's individual needs. But for that person that says, you know what, I really want to have a zero carbon footprint, it really matters to me that I have all green power. You can click, I want 100% green power there. And you can refresh the results. And what ends up happening is that now, instead of having 130 plans to choose from, you maybe, say, have 30 plans to choose from or 25 plans to choose from. And now those plans start at 12 cents per kilowatt hour because you're paying a premium for a 4- and 5-star rated company that's providing you electricity that comes from a very specific type of resource. And there's not going to be as many. It's going to be more niche. And so as you hone in on that, the price goes up a little bit. But what I'm going to do when it comes time for people to make this decision and go on and shop is that I'm going to have our all-in electric rate up on our website. And you're going to hear me talking a lot about what our rate is because that's basically going to be your benchmark. There are a lot of folks that I've learned over the years doing this that it's kind of a saying that customers don't pay a rate, they pay a bill. Meaning that most folks know relatively dollar-wise what it costs them for their electric bill. But you pick somebody off the street, they're not going to immediately be able to say exactly what their price per kilowatt hour is. If you ask me what I pay Atmos Energy, I have no idea. I know generally what my gas bill is, but I don't know what my rate is. And so we'll be screaming a lot about this is our all-in rate when it comes time to choose because that'll be your benchmark. So that you can go in there and you can say, all right, I could cut that rate substantially down. Or I can layer in some of these filters and I'm still paying a better rate than I am today. And if that's the case, the other option that you have in this is how long of a contract you want to sign. And so if you've gone through and you found, all right, I've met all of my criteria, and I found the company that I think that I want to get my power from, and it's at a rate that's better than what I'm paying today, then the suggestion would be to go ahead and lock that rate in for 12 or 24 months so that you're locked into that rate and you know that's where you're going to be. If you're not sure right off the bat, you'll have the ability to sign a 3 or a 6 month deal to allow you to say, all right, I've run 6 months with this company. I want to leave them or I want to stay with them. So you're going to have options up front if you're unsure so that you don't lock something in long term that you're not going to be happy with. One of the crucial components and one of the nice things about going through the website to do this, and when the time comes to shop, you don't have to go through the website. We're going to have listed all of those providers on our website with their contact information. You can simply get on the phone and call down those numbers and talk to these companies and decide who you want to go with. Or you can go through the website. It's really up to you. But in going through the website, each and every one of these providers is required, when you click through, to have a fact sheet. And I'm going to encourage, and I'm going to be out there a lot telling everybody needs to read the fact sheets. Yes? That's all in the power to choose. Yes, sir. And again, like these packets I'm handing out, if you come hear me talk 6 weeks from now, I'll have all the providers in these packets that we're handing out. You can simply just call down those numbers in the packet if you want to. But if you go to the website, on this fact sheet, in a very clear format, every single one of these providers is required to tell you what their entire fee structure is. And that's really important. One of the questions that I am almost certainly going to get when we get to the FAQ section is going to be about deposits. Deposits are going to be something that folks are going to have to engage in as we make this transition. If you were to leave Lubbock today and you were moved to Austin, say, or San Antonio, and you were to sign up with their municipally owned utilities, as a new customer, you'd be required to pay a deposit. Well, this is a project where everybody's picking a new provider. And so there is going to be a deposit that's required. LP&L is going to be required to give you a letter of credit so that if you're a good pay customer, you can potentially get that deposit waived. If you're a low-income customer, there are state and local resources to help with those deposits, and we'll have that information up on our website. But if you're just the average customer that's going to pay your deposit, that fact sheet's going to tell you what that deposit is. It's going to tell you what the policy is to refund that deposit. LP&L today, if you're a residential customer and you have 12 months of good pay, you're automatically refunded back your deposit. If you're an LP&L customer today and you have 12 months of good pay, we automatically refund your deposit back. Right? When we get to the end of this project and we transfer everybody to their new providers, any one of our customers that have a deposit on file will all get their deposit back. But many of our customers don't have a deposit on file because they paid their deposit years ago. They're a good pay customer. They got their deposit returned, and there they are. But this fact sheet is also going to tell you things like, if you're not happy with this company, what, if any, is the penalty to cancel that contract? It's going to tell you, for example, going back to that one or two star rated company that had rock bottom pricing, you may look through there and you may see on their fact sheet that they charge you $50 every time you call them for customer service, right? Every single customer service thing you get charged separately for. So that's why you want to read the fact sheet, because that may be why their rate is so incredibly low versus some others that provide these services, and that's built into their rate. So it's a key component. Absolutely, because Yes, it will be. No. You're gonna have. There's gonna be somewhere between 20. I'm sorry. Sure. Yeah, so we'll just go ahead and transition over to the question and answer period, because that was really my last slide, and I've told y'all to follow us and go to the website so y'all know that. The question was, that was a sampling of Midland. Will Lubbock's be that complex? Will we have that many? And yeah, if you look at all of these cities around us, you'll see that each one of those markets have about the same amount of providers, and we expect that. And we've certainly seen that from how many people have shown up to test with us. So we're still expecting that our market is going to be as full as Midlands, as Abilene's, as Wichita Falls. And it's about how many providers? You know, the best guess is 20 to 30 different providers offering 120 or so different plans. And again, you don't have to review every single one of those plans. You can look for low cost. You can split through, but that's how many you do have to choose from. Yes, sir.
You've talked about entering a zip code. Are you going to have different providers for different zip codes within the city?
No, everybody that operates within our service territory, right? They're gonna have their offerings no matter where the zip code is. The zip code is to qualify that you live in our service territory. One thing that I should point out to everybody is that this project only affects Lubbock Power and Light. It only affects LP&L customers. If you are a customer of SPEC today, and that's where you get your electricity, you'll continue to be a SPEC customer. XL, you'll continue to be an XL customer. This only affects LP&L's electric customers. Another question I get a lot is, can I pick SPEC as my choice? And you cannot. SPEC is a member-owned cooperative. They are regulated, and they're going to continue to do business as they do today in their service territory. There are 75 electric cooperatives around the state. There's 72 municipally owned utilities around the state that comprise public power. Lubbock's obviously one of those munis. So everybody else within that realm will operate exactly the same. Our customers are the only ones that will be transitioned to the competitive market. Yes?
I'm assuming that y'all will somehow collect all of the electricity in a bulk and then put it through to the system. My question is, regardless of who my provider is, if one of the utilities, the 20 or 30 that provide electricity to you today say that I can't furnish you any electricity, and I have chosen them, my assumption is I'm still going to get some electricity to my house.
Yeah, you will, and that's where the provider of last resort comes in, the default provider. I talked about when we go make this transition that people that have not chosen will be automatically assigned one of those three. The other component of that is if at any point in time your chosen provider, so you go out and you choose Company A, and Company A is your provider, and for whatever reason they go out of business, you don't go into the dark. You automatically get transferred back over to to the default provider, and then you can go pick your new provider from there. And that's why we make that designation, so that if at any point in time a provider goes out of business, however many customers are served by that provider don't go down. They don't sit there and go, I got home today, I don't have power. You start trying to call around, you will get transferred to another company, and then you'll be able to go pick a new provider.
Right, but in July when it's the hottest,
Right.
and it's all providers are still operating, but one can't keep up with demand, and I have chosen that one that can't keep up with demand.
Yes.
I'm not going to still have my electricity go out.
No, you're not, and that's also part of their requirement. You know, every single one of these companies that are testing in Lubbock with us have already been registered with the PUC and have had to go through that full set of state qualifications and registration. So that's how we know that these folks that are coming in are reputable right off the bat to a certain degree, because the PUC has signed off. So there's no instance where somebody locally could just hatch a scheme and say, I'm going to go pick up some customers for a period of time. They've had to go through a long process to get registered.
Excuse me, sir.
You indicated that the all-in price for Lubbock LP&L was 13.5 cents. Will each of the providers that are shown on the Power to Choose website, will that price be the all-in price?
Yes, it will.
Okay.
Yes, it will. Your price that you see on the Power to Choose is going to include everything rolled up into one rate. You know, one of the reasons I stopped for a second on that pie chart, and it's important to do so, to talk about the structure is this is new for folks here in Lubbock. And we've had a version of competition before, but it was two vertically integrated companies building facilities to each person's house. This is the competitive market that was established in the state of Texas in 1999, and one of the things that's important to remember is that I hear a lot of folks go, "I'm going to be charged twice now. I'm going to pay my provider, and I have to pay LP&L." And that's why I stopped on that chart, is to say we're always going to be the delivery system. We're always going to maintain the highways that the electricity that you've chosen flows over. And our cost will get recouped in that all-in rate that you sign on the website. There always has to be a delivery system. Anywhere in the state of Texas that has competition today, so they've had it for the past 20 years, Encore, CenterPoint, AEP, Texas New Mexico Power. One of those companies owns those wires in those competitive areas. Now, if you go to Austin or San Antonio, they own their grids because they operate like we do today. But if Austin or San Antonio made the decision like we have to go into competition, they would basically break apart, and San Antonio or Austin would then maintain their wires and deliver the power, and then you would get to go choose where you got the power from. And again, that power cost makes up 70% of your rate today. And that's why it's substantial being able to choose, that you're being able to choose what affects the majority of your bill today.
I have a question. So how does that work with rental properties? I have a property and LP&L has it where it kicks over to me once the renter moves out.
Mhm.
So how is that going to work with a new renter? And does the renter choose their own power company? Do I choose that? How does that work?
It's a good question. So rental properties, apartments would be similar to this. Let me take the first part of it, being if I'm in a rental property, who chooses the new provider? So if you, as the tenant, get the bill from LP&L and pay the bill, you'll be the one that goes and chooses the provider. If it's a lease situation where it's an all bills paid, where you pay your electricity and your utilities through your landlord, then that landlord will be the one that goes and chooses. But there will still be the option for those continuous service agreements. And you will do that like you will have it through your provider, but we'll have a notification on there too, because it's still going to be our job when your provider says, "I have a new customer at ... Juliet Avenue." It'll still be our job to make sure that your meter's on the back of your house connected to our wires and that it's running. So that's how I kind of break it up, is to say whoever pays the bill today is the one that's going to choose the provider. But you're still going to have the option to have those continuous service agreements, because I know for people that own a lot of rental properties, for example, they want to have the ability that if a tenant up and moves, that they're notified of it and that it comes back to their name. Not that they are going to assume the renter's dead, right? There's that point of delineation, but that it comes back to their name so they don't find out 3 weeks later and find out a bunch of stuff in the house is broken because the AC's been off in the month of July or something like that, or in the wintertime.
To keep to paint and refresh for the next.
Yes.
So do any of these sites indicate if there's a price break for people with solar?
Oh, good question. So solar panel customers, we have had a big increase in solar customers for us here in Lubbock. We have 1,600, I think, solar customers. 1,700 our system today. I planted our CFO over here if I had any questions. So, yeah, we got about 1,700 solar customers, but I mean that's about doubled in the past year or two. So, folks who are investing in these, I'll just take one point of privilege and say, if you're going to invest in solar panels, please sit down and do the math, and please always regard it as a substantial investment in your home. Too many times, customers will go out and get solar panels thinking that it's going to have a payback in 2 years, or even worse, it's going to be a moneymaker, and it's just not. You always got to remember that, Lubbock Power and Light, we've had a net metering rate, which meant that solar customers could have a dollar-to-dollar match from what their solar panels made versus what they consumed every month. But we've never had a buyback program. But now that we're going into the market, if you're somebody that has a solar panel, you're going to want to tell your provider that, because you're likely going to get put on a solar rate, which is going to give you a little bit better base rate. And you're going to want to try to find somebody that has a buyback program, so that if your panel does overproduce, that you get something for that. Lubbock Power and Light does not currently buy back electricity. We just do that dollar-to-dollar match. So there will be a benefit to folks that have solar panels on their home. But I just go back to, I talked to somebody recently that somebody had come to their front door, and they signed up right then and there, and they financed, $20-something thousand worth of panels. And so they are replacing some of what they would have bought from electricity from us, from what their panel produces, but they've also got a $175 finance charge that they've got to pay for every month for the solar panels that they installed. So just always make sure that you're reading the fine print on solar panels. But for those that have it, you should be able to get a benefit in the competitive market. Correct. No, that will be the same. So, like today, if you have solar with us, your base rate is a third of what the regular customer's base rate is. But instead of paying a set $8.07 a month, you pay $30 a month. The idea being that you are generating most all of your electricity. There is a burden on the system for doing that, but also the idea is that we have things that we have to recoup that are infrastructure charges, so those are in that set meter fee of $30. The idea being, in a perfect world, you put panels on your home and you don't consume hardly any electricity from us. But we still have to maintain those lines, so that $30 allows us to recoup all of our costs if you don't pay a dime more to us. And so as we go into this new system, again, you'll get a better rate for having those panels. We've just got to make sure that with each person that has panels, that they're still contributing what the rest of the customers are to support the grid as a whole, locally. Yeah.
Question. My question is, I've thought about putting in a emergency generator because of the shutdown, where you don't lose your food and everything else. What happens on that? Am I going to get money knocked off of my bill because I didn't get electricity from them because it was shut down?
Well, here's what I would say. Anybody that has the ability to safely put in some form of a generator, it's never a bad idea. I mean, we should all be prepared for power outages, because no provider can ever promise you uninterruptible power. I don't think that somebody needs to go put in a generator because of what happened back in 21, right? Remember that we also rotated outages in the Southwest Power Pool too. So I don't know that it's necessary to get a generator. And to be honest with you, I don't know if there's any specific type of incentive or anything like that for somebody that has a generator. But if at any point you're out of power, the ultimate discount is that you're not buying any electricity whatsoever.
I know, but I mean, if I'm not using your that person's electricity, I would think that they should knock some off your bill, because I went to the trouble to get something to back what they didn't have.
It's backing up what you've got on your side of the meter. It's not necessarily backing up the grid. So there wouldn't be any incentive or anything like that for having a generator. But I would tell you that, again, if you have the ability to do that safely, to put one in, it's never a bad idea to do that, because you will have an outage at your home at some point in time. I mean, it's just electricity exists outdoors, and things are going to fall into lines, and our linemen are going to go fix them, but you will lose power at a certain point in time. I don't foresee instances where you've got, Winter Storm Uri happening on a regular basis that it's absolutely crucial that you have that generator, I guess would be my answer to you. That's a good point, yeah. Again, Harvey Hall, everybody. So he works with us, and he's right, and that's what I was trying to get to is that, that generator is going to exist to benefit you at your home on your side of the meter, when and if there is an outage. But he's right. Feeding back in is a public safety issue for sure. Where we go next? Who's got the mic? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you
ma'am.
very much. You're very informative. My question concerns ERCOT.
Yes.
Since LPNL is now some of that, or they are part of it, when we choose, ERCOT would not be in a choice of a new provider. And secondly, ERCOT has announced through Channel 11 that they would not be able to furnish the grid for Lubbock,
Okay.
LPNL summer customers.
So let me address.
And are you going to take them with you when you go?
We are connected to them today, and we're going to be connected to them forever. ERCOT is not a power provider. ERCOT is not a power company. ERCOT is the electric grid that is regulated by the state of Texas. If you look across the United States, you've got a series of electrical grids. Right now, we are hooked onto the Southwest Power Pool. We are at the very, very southern end of the Southwest Power Pool. It's a multi-state grid that goes all the way up to Canada. One of the reasons that we left the Southwest Power Pool was that if we had stayed in the Southwest Power Pool, our only option, given their rules, would have been to build about a $750 million power plant that we would have debt funded here in Lubbock, and our ratepayers would have solely paid that off. The reason we decided to go to ERCOT, and ERCOT, because it's contained within the state of Texas, is fully regulated by the state of Texas and by the PUC of Texas, but going to ERCOT allowed us to, instead of building one power plant, we had the ability to build transmission lines, hook up to ERCOT, and those transmission lines get reimbursed by a rate of return across the state of Texas. So our customers are not out that $750 million solely. And if we had gone that route, today that plant would be in service. And if, God forbid, a tornado or something like that ran through that power plant, that would be our one source of power that would be out for a period of time. So we made the decision to go to ERCOT because it gave us more flexibility in what we were going to do long term. And then as we went through this process in 2018 and 19 and 2020, that's when we started the public talks, and we decided that if we're ever going to bring competition to Lubbock, this is the only time that we could do so, because we are transitioning our business and we're uniquely situated to do that. When ERCOT experienced the issues in 2021, it was during the legislative session. They've since passed SB 2 and 3 and a host of different House bills. So every power plant in the state of Texas is now weatherized. They're going through and they're mandating, although I'll be honest with you, I wish it was more stringent, that they weatherize all of the natural gas lines throughout the state that feed these power plants. But more importantly, they've shifted their model at the PUC in terms of regulating ERCOT to be one of low cost, to be one more of reliability. So as we stand here today, if I look at the planning models for the Southwest Power Pool, they've got about the same reserve margin as ERCOT does over here. Now, what ERCOT just announced the other day was that this summer, just like every summer we've had before us, we're going to break demand this summer, meaning there's going to be more power consumed on the grid this summer than last. We've broken that record every single summer. But what they said in the report, just like they've said in years past, is in our extreme scenario, where we have all of these really bad factors on the grid, if all of those happen, that we're going to be at a point in time where we're going to have a very thin reserve margin and have to take actions. That does not mean that they're going to flip the switch and start having rotating outages. There's a lot of things that can happen before you get to that point. And I think one thing you're going to see this summer, and it's not just them, it's the Southwest Power Pool too. And you'll hear me talking about that. There will be calls for voluntary conservation this summer, because they have said that they're going to start utilizing that tool. It is not mandatory. They're not going to come into your home and throttle down or up your thermostat or turn off your equipment. They're not going to do any of that. But they're going to call out and they're going to say, okay, today is one of those days where it's going to be extremely hot and the wind's not going to be blowing and it's going to be tight from these hours. And we ask everybody to do what they can to conserve. But I'm out there every single day during the summertime telling you to do the exact same thing for your own benefit. You saw me on the news last week saying that we're already starting to hit 90-degree days and 100-degree days. When you leave in the morning, adjust your thermostat up by a few degrees, close your blinds, do things like that to be more energy efficient on your end. They're saying the same thing across the grid, and if everybody does little things, it helps the health and safety of the grid. But I'll tell you, like the Mid-Continent grid, the one that's based out of Indianapolis, they put out a similar call last summer where they said, we don't think we're going to have enough power in July. And they ended up being fine in that. But this is a national infrastructure issue. It truly is. And I'm not just saying that to draw off of ERCOT, but you look across the United States, our grid system needs to be built out, and we need more generation on all of these grids. So I will agree with you that I hope that we get more natural gas generation on the ERCOT grid and soon, and I know state leaders do too. But do not take them saying that we're breaking demand this summer as an automatic that there's going to be reliability issues. Because there's a lot of things that they can do before we get to that point.
Can you tell me if all of our 20 or 30 providers that we have choices of, are they all connected to the ERCOT grid?
Yes.
So there's no choice to get around ERCOT.
ERCOT is the only grid that has, in terms of Southwest Power Pool and ERCOT's the only grid with competition. We had competition in the Southwest Power Pool, but it was that competition prior to 2010 that was XL and us building lines down each alley. But no, this competitive market only exists in ERCOT. But again, when you look at the planning models for SPP, it's not a rosier picture than ERCOT. It's just we hear about ERCOT every single day. The Dallas Morning News and the Houston Chronicle and these are closely following ERCOT. But if you go look at the planning models in these for the Southwest Power Pool, they're having issues just with reliability just as much. But yes, vast improvements. They really have. Look, I started talking about ERCOT in 2015 to groups like this. 90 days out from go live, Memorial Day of 21, Winter Storm Uri hits. So from everybody in this room, I can tell you I was the most frustrated that, here we are on the doorstep of going to ERCOT and this happens. But what I've learned is that it was a blessing, because before we even stepped in the door, the legislative session was over and they had passed these major reform bills that are now taking effect. And this session, they'll pass more and they'll do more to try to bolster that going forward. And our goal, through our local delegation, and Senator Perry's been great about this, Chairman Burrows has been great about it, keep on them. Keep on them, keep on them. Make sure that they continue. Don't go through a session where you don't make improvements to the grid. And so that's where we've been encouraged that they continue to do so, because you almost have to keep up with the crazy demand that's going on in Texas, and much less across the United States.
Matt, we've got a question back here.
Okay.
Would you tell us more about the rate?
So the question being, the rates on the website, do they change? Yes, they are constantly changing. One thing I pointed out to a group is that, with municipal power, we are consistent, but it also means that we cannot change as the market changes as quickly as these providers can. So natural gas has been low, and they've responded in kind. And so that's why you see these rates that are starting in the 8-cent range, going up, there's a lot of rates before you hit our 13.5 cents. If natural gas jumps, if natural gas goes from being about $3 per and I should say this, natural gas drives the cost of electricity. It's the backbone of the electric system, so it drives that cost. If natural gas jumps to $10 and stays there, you'll see all of this pricing follow that. But we would be too. But this reacts faster than we do necessarily, because our base rate's been locked in since 2017, but our pass-through of that power cost, we adjust that twice a year. These folks are adjusting every day based off of the long-term and the current forecasts in the market.
In 21, when we had the winter, we had some people that were charged extravagant amount for power that time, and normally it was really low. How do you tell the difference between which companies?
So, and it goes back to the legislation we talked about a minute ago in the reform packages. They used to allow residential customers, small businesses, to go out and sign these variable contracts that basically allowed them to go shop in the market for themselves. The problem with that is that if you don't have the knowledge and the ability to hedge and lock things in and do all sorts of complicated mechanisms, you can get exposed. So one of the things they outlawed with the reform packages was no more allowing of those variable type rates for these commercial and small business folks. If you look at Lubbock Power and Light, basically all the power that you consume this summer, we locked it in last summer. When it came to Winter Storm Uri, we actually bought insurance before that storm. And, we normally budget for about $15 million for natural gas in the month of February, $20 million. Our bill that month was $126 million. But we've got folks that we work with, and we've got a financial team that watches this every single day, could kind of see around the corner, took action so that we mitigated that down to a manageable sum of about $16 million. But what happened was these residential customers, they were going out and they were buying out of that market, and when that storm came and you had supply and demand go crazy, the price of power in that market went from $30 to $9,000 and stayed there. And so these people got these $7,000-$8,000 bills because their rate skyrocketed. If you were with Austin Energy during the storm, you would not have seen that because your rate was locked in. Or if you were somebody in Dallas that didn't go with one of those variable contracts, you would not have seen that because your rate was locked in. These folks had a rate where every single day they could go by and do their own thing. So that's one of the things that the legislature did is that, okay, we're not going to allow those types of residential deals anymore so people don't get stuck in those binds anymore. But it's a good question because I get that almost everywhere. It wasn't the storm itself that did that. It was the folks that got exposed because they weren't in a locked-in rate as it is today. We're not. And actually, Lubbock Power and Light, we got a bill passed last session that said that they can't uplift Winter Storm Uri charges to us. Yeah, some of those municipal providers, they were allowed to basically do a winter storm recovery rate for their customers. We were just in the unique position that we had hedged and that we got paid out, and we could pay it right then and there. We didn't have to do a rate adjustment. But they allowed some of those utilities to do just that. But we're not affected by that here in Lubbock.
Can you hear me? Okay. So we have our current power companies generating electricity and everything still and all that. Is that correct?
Not really. In terms of like Lubbock Power and Light generating,
Right.
we do have power plants, but our power plants only produce about 100 megawatts, which is a very small amount. We've actually been in the process of shuttering our power plants really since about 2015 because they're just old, aging plants that aren't economical to run. And so when we make this transition, we're still going to run those units that we've got right now, but starting in 2024, we're going to start taking a look at what is the best value and use for those, because it doesn't make any sense for us to run it if it's costing y'all money. And that's what we found with some of our aging units back in 2015 is we said, we need to, plus it gets very costly when they break and whatnot.
That's kind of my concern too, because it sounds like right now everywhere is continuing to grow, more and more construction, more and more population. At the same time, how are we looking at the long-term effect of it? Because if we're at the tail end of these other grids and stuff, and who's producing more and more, are they just getting bigger power plants over there where they're sending from? I know we're getting more fans.
So being a part of the Southwest Power Pool, it was more true that we were sitting here going, they may be increasing power plants in Nebraska, but we can't access those. In Texas, any of the power plants in Texas can be accessed by any of the providers. Texas, the ERCOT has a rule that says, unlike SPP, where you have to be attached to the facility that's powering you, basically, in ERCOT you can buy from anybody. And so the main thing in ERCOT is just how do we, throughout the state, add more power plants? And that's the big argument at the legislature right now is they're sitting there going, what's the best way to do that? We've fixed a lot of the day-to-day issues. Now we need to fix the forecast. We need to figure out how can we properly incentivize more natural gas power plants.
My concerns with us growing like still, and then if we have power plants here locally, I mean, we have like a storm drainage runoff fee and stuff. What if that were to go towards making a long-term plan or something? I don't know if that idea has ever been brought up or anything.
It has. The problem is that, if you look at ERCOT, just the entire grid, so basically the whole state of Texas that's on that grid, ERCOT, it's about 83,000 megawatts. We have the ability, if all of our stuff is up and running, to generate 100 megawatts here. And so the only way that we would build generation is if it made sense for us to do so. And it didn't back in 2015 to spend that $750 million to do so. And so that's why we went the opposite direction. But you've got a bunch of folks that are in the planning queue at ERCOT to get these power plants up and running. So that's where they're trying to cut some of this red tape and get these power plants up and running. And I don't want to just constantly talk about natural gas and make anyone here feel or believe that renewable resources don't play a vital role in all of this. They really do. And even if you take Winter Storm Uri, as much as folks liked to bash green energy during that week of Winter Storm Uri, it was coastal wind that stood up and really helped strengthen the grid on the back half. If you look at all around us, you look at all these windmills around us, that's doing a service for the grid, and it's also helping a lot of these small communities. The problem is that the hottest point of the day is when the sun goes down, but the night winds haven't kicked up quite yet. And that's what ERCOT, and that's what they're talking about when they talk about those scenarios. They're talking about those couple of hours in the hot of summer. I feel like Joel wants to jump in.
If you don't mind, Matt, I'd really appreciate that
Joel
question.
Ivey is our director, by the way.
Thank you all for coming, for one thing. But to kind of address the shortage of generation and whatnot, we are not going to be in the generation business anymore. It doesn't make sense for us to be in it. Our generators are too small to make that big of an impact anyway. And so what we're doing instead and this is what we've been doing for 100 years. We take a look 10, 20 years out in time and look at the size of our lines that we've got, the numbers of lines that we've got coming into Lubbock, for example, and try to make a determination, do we need to build a new line so we then can import more power. ERCOT as a whole is taking a look at the total needs of the whole state, and they're making determinations on when and where generators need to be added to the system, but that's not going to be on us to be doing that anymore. And we're kind of small for that. It's a little risky, to be honest with you. Matt touched on it. It costs a lot of money for us just to keep the ones we have running, and they're very small. We can only cover about 19% of our own needs, so we don't really have that much to begin with. So the main thing is, do we have big enough wires coming into Lubbock so that we can transport that power in? And just one point of clarification on ERCOT, if you don't mind. Is that okay? ERCOT owns 0 poles and wires. So when you're thinking about ERCOT as a power provider, they're not. We're the power provider. Encore, CenterPoint Energy in Houston, AEP, North Texas and South Texas, TNMP, companies like that are the power providers. We own the poles and the wires, and it's up to us to make sure that we've got the facilities that are necessary to deliver that energy to you. ERCOT is the operator that tells us when and where and how to do it. Right, so they have no ownership stake in that at all. So as we talk about the grids moving one place or another, we are the grid. So ERCOT just helps us in managing that power flows on it.
A really good point that I want to add to that. Austin, about a month ago, had an ice storm. And Austin was just about shut out of power all week long. The reason was not ERCOT. The reason is that Austin, as a municipal utility, as a local government, made the decision that they were going to stop trimming trees. I cannot tell you how angry people get at me personally when we've sent somebody by and we've trimmed somebody's trees. And I get it that trees come at a premium here in Lubbock. However, when you don't trim trees and they grow into lines and you get an ice storm, it wreaks havoc. And so I was talking to groups and they were saying, well, look at Austin. ERCOT's blacked out again. And I'm like, that's not ERCOT. That is whatever you want to call the folks running the Austin City Council, making dumb decisions for sake of a group of folks that don't want trees trimmed. So that's where it shows you that it really is a local issue. No, what I'm saying is that as a residential customer, you're not going to be able to sign those same types of plans that they had available at that point in time. There are large entities, there are ones that will be able, like if you, I don't want to name names, but I'm sure you can pick out who our largest user is and maybe our second largest user. They're going to go with an energy consultant, right? They're going to sign a very complex plan. They may have something like that they do for themselves, but your average customer, you're going to get offered a plan that's locked in. Now, it may be a tiered plan where up to 1,000 kilowatt hours, you're paying 8 cents, and 1,000 kilowatt hours to 2,000 kilowatt hours, for that tranche you're paying, right, 8.3 cents and a little bit less on the back end. But that's still locked in. That's just tiered based off your usage. It's not like we talked about a minute ago where if the price in the market goes to $5,000, that you, the end consumer, are going to be exposed. Yes, sir. I know you've been one.
Yes, I've got two questions now. Does LP&L provide you guys these shoes? Y'all are wearing matching shoes.
No. They don't, because go look at Harvey's shoes. He's not wearing brown shoes. We made fun of him the other day. Okay. That's why I said.
At the onset, at the beginning of this, you said that if, for whatever reason, we don't choose a provider, one would be assigned. And I think I understood you said be the 3 prime providers.
Yes, sir.
If that occurs, or we have a contractual commitment with those guys?
No, you can jump out as soon as you want to. That's just to make sure you land somewhere. So that's just, they're just going to keep you there. Now, after 90 days, they're gonna extend on and lock you in, but you're gonna have 3 months to say, I don't like this. I can bail out, go to Power to Choose, call somebody, go to another provider.
Okay, so you could
Yes.
probably use that 90 days as a little buffer to see how this actually
You can.
goes.
Now, we've all kind of got our kind of internal ideas of what the percentage of customers not deciding or not choosing is going to be. I suggest to everybody to go out there and choose somebody, but just know that you've got the ability to go shorter versus longer if you're not certain with what you're locking in. And just always remember, too, there's such a difference between consumption and rate. I'll answer a lot of questions 60 days from now where folks will say, how come you guys changed your rate when we actually just lowered our rate 18%? And it's because you're using 2 to 3 times more electricity in the summer than you are, last month. And so your cost has gone up on consumption, not necessarily your rate. But when you lock in with these providers, you'll be able to lock in a rate regardless of season. Yes. We'll hear and then. When do we expect FERC to approve the final 30%? What I will tell you is that we're having calls every day, and we do believe that this is going to be shorter, not longer. So we're really looking at a shorter term delay, not something that's going to drag on and on. We really thought that they were going to approve it right off. We understand they want to take a look at it, but we still think we can get this fixed in a relatively short time frame and get that final approval. Yes, sir.
There are many government agencies that consume electricity in the area, starting federal, state, county, city, school districts, hospitals, Texas Tech, et cetera. This may be rhetorical now, but who's going to decide for the city itself, who consumes electricity, which plan they accept? And just hold that for a second. Each one of these organizations are going to have to go through the same process, just like us citizens will have to do. Those government agencies are not funded and staffed for that type of business. They may say, maybe we should get together, all the government agencies locally, and say, let's go together and talk about this and see what we can get as a rate as a bulk group, possibly. I don't know if that's allowable. That being the case, if that should happen, would they assume, just by the general economic theory of bigger demand, buy more product, you get a lower price? Given that to be a case, have you had a study, just to start with, by the city to say, or LPNL, I don't know, as an entity to say, if everybody were to go together and we as a representative of the city would say, okay, all you 30 companies, give us your best rate and see where we can go, would that have been done in the past, just as an example, to say all customers are going to buy from one of these because they gave us a hell of a good rate? That I don't think is necessarily the way to go, but that'd be a starting point to say, all these 30 companies have come forward and said if they got all the business that Lubbock can provide, this is the rate we would provide.
That's a great question, and I'm going to kick it to the council member in a second to talk about what they've decided. But if you take a Texas Tech, they have a consultant that they're already working with, and they're examining all of their campuses, and they're going through it and trying to decide how best to format it. They have campuses that are in competitive areas, but this is going to be their biggest footprint, and so they've already started that process. The Chamber of Commerce has an entity that they're working with for their members, but I've gone out to a lot of small to medium churches, talk to medium-sized businesses, and I regularly say, if y'all have a group of you that can go in together, that you do have more bargaining power, especially when it comes to churches. So a lot of these churches have decided to kind of band together and go as a unit to talk to these different providers for the very reason that you said. When it comes to the city of Lubbock, obviously there are a ton of facilities owned by the city of Lubbock and a largest consumer, and so they're doing likewise.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, Bill, you're right. I mean, you're on point. But as we move into a free market situation, which is what this is, deregulation, you could. There's strength in numbers, and anybody could get together and negotiate whatever you want. Or you could negotiate your best deal, not whatever you want. As far as the city goes, the city has a very specialized have very specialized energy needs. And although we're involved in the decision making, we have a responsibility to make sure that we're controlling costs, because the costs that are incurred at the city, and especially those that fall under the general fund, affect your property tax rate. And so the city has metered and non-metered needs. The city, you may be out of power in some cases, but you want the city to have power because you want water pumps running. The water doesn't flow to your faucet just because, okay? And we have backup, we have diesel generation, and the city manager will raise his hand as soon as I get off track on here. But because we have those specialized needs, the council has hired someone to help us make the best decision for our citizens and our ratepayers for what the city of Lubbock consumes in electricity. I'd say we have time for maybe 2 more questions, and then we'll stick around for any one-on-one y'all might want to have. I'll kick it back to Matt.
Something just by, it's like going to pick out a doctor. Well, how can we be assured that we're picking some company that's reliable?
Sure. Yeah, and there are a lot of resources that you can look into. You can look at number of customers served. You can look at how long they've been in the business. You can look at, I've highlighted the customer ratings, but to your point, I get that. So what I would tell you is that looking at the companies and looking at their makeup and looking at how long they've been in business is a key component. We've got 10 questions to ask, but we're going to try to even expand those out so that there is, if your concern is cost, then here are a list of questions you can ask. If it's reliability here, right? If it's both, it's this. So we're going to build that out. Right now, we just started with 10. When we get to this point, if reliability is what you care about and customer service, you should be able to look down and tailor that list and those questions to ask those providers. And for some folks, it's going to be more advantageous for them to get on the phone and actually talk to somebody than it is just to look at the offerings on the website, especially if they want to know more about those individual companies, for sure. That's a good question. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So the question is, there is beyond just the star rating, are there customer reviews, kind of testimonials, and I believe that there are websites that provide that. I just don't know if it's on the powertochoose.org or on that fact sheet. But that's a good, but that's a good question. And if there are these that are kind of, BBB or consumer bureaus that are reputable that do those types of things, then I think we need to look at putting those on the website as well. So I'm glad that you raised that. Just a different way to view a customer rating than just the star ratings. That's a good point. Not all of them, no. And that's a question. That's a question that you're going to want to ask. And I'm glad that you asked that. What you're going to ask is, do you have a physical presence here in Lubbock? One of the things that we did, that the council looked at when they reviewed all of the qualifications for people being the default providers, 2 of those that had a percentage ranking were, 1, how did you deal with and what programs do you have for low-income customers? And number 2, can you demonstrate what type of a community presence that you've had in communities that you've operated in? Have you been good corporate citizens? Have you given back to the community? Do you have a physical presence? So that's part of the reason how we landed on these 3 companies, but that's a prime question that you're going to want to ask. We got a lot of folks that like to come to our physical office and give a check every month. And if you're one of those people, then you're going to probably want to pick somebody that's got at least some level of storefront here.
Okay, good. All right, we're going to wrap. First of all, before we break, we're going to stick around for questions. Give Matt Rose a hand. The guy's a trooper. He stood up here and answered a lot of questions. On behalf of Dr. Jennifer Wilson and myself, we want to thank you for coming. We hope that you gained a little bit of knowledge. There's still more to learn in this process. Both our cards are outside. If you want to contact us directly, I think I can speak for her. I think she's open to that. There's also comment cards out there if you have any other city issues that you need us to address. That's why we're here. That's why you elect us. I'll just tell you, yes, the alleys are muddy. They're going to be muddy for a couple of weeks. We know. But Dr. Wilson, would you like to add anything? Thank you very much. Thanks for being here. We'll stick around and answer any one-on-ones you have. Have a safe evening.